The rain poured down mercilessly, turning the streets into rivers of mud and despair. Underneath a broken street lamp, a girl shivered, her thin, ragged clothes soaked through. Her eyes were hollow, searching the ground for crumbs, anything to soothe the gnawing hunger. She moved through the crowded streets, invisible to the bustling world around her. People walked by, umbrellas shielding them from the downpour, not sparing her a single glance. To them, she was just another shadow, another piece of the city's forgotten dirt. A luxury car rolled to a stop at the corner. Through the tinted window, a man watched her. His face was expressionless, eyes calculating as he observed her every move. She stumbled, knees hitting the wet pavement, and clutched her stomach in pain. The man's lips curled into the slightest smile, a hint of satisfaction dancing in his cold eyes. He pressed a button, and the window slid down just enough for his voice to reach her. "Are you hungry?" he asked, his voice smooth and calm. The girl looked up, startled by the unexpected kindness. "Yes. I'm hungry," she stammered, her voice weak and trembling. The man leaned back, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the leather seat. "I can give you food, shelter, a job," he offered, his gaze never leaving her. "A job," she repeated, disbelief flickering across her face. "Yes. To take care of my son. He's very sick and needs someone trustworthy." The girl's heart pounded. A chance to escape the streets, to finally feel safe and warm. It seemed too good to be true. She hesitated, but desperation clawed at her, forcing her to nod. "I'll do it. I'll take care of him." The man's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Good. Then get in." As the door opened, she felt a chill run down her spine. But she pushed the feeling away, convincing herself it was just the cold. She climbed into the car, the warmth wrapping around her like a blanket. The man watched her closely, his fingers still tapping rhythmically. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Just remember, you're never alone in that house. Not even for a second." Before she could ask what he meant, the door locked with a click. She glanced at him, but his face had returned to that cold, emotionless mask. The car sped off, leaving the rain and the empty streets behind. Unbeknownst to her, in the shadows of his mansion, a camera was already waiting. Watching. Waiting. Recording her every move. But the man was hiding something, and the camera would reveal the truth. The wind howled through the narrow alleys, carrying the bitter chill of winter. Underneath a crumbling bridge, she huddled, knees to her chest, desperately trying to stay warm. Her clothes were tattered, barely enough to shield her from the cold, and her body shivered uncontrollably. Her name was Lily. Once, she had a family, a home, and a life filled with laughter. But fate had been cruel. An accident had taken her parents, leaving her alone in a world that seemed to have no place for her. With no relatives to take her in, she ended up on the streets, fighting to survive each day. Her stomach growled, a sharp pain shooting through her as hunger gnawed at her insides. She pressed a hand to her belly, trying to quiet the ache, but it was no use. 3 days without food, and her strength was fading fast. Dragging herself to her feet, Lily stumbled out from under the bridge. Her vision blurred, and the world around her seemed to spin. She staggered along the sidewalk, hoping to find something, anything to eat. That was when she saw him. A man dressed in an expensive suit, standing beside a sleek, black car. He was tall, with sharp features and eyes as cold as ice. Even from a distance, his presence was intimidating, almost suffocating. Lily hesitated, fear gripping her heart. She had learned long ago not to trust strangers, especially those who looked like they had everything. But then, her stomach growled again, and desperation overpowered her caution. The man watched her with a calculating gaze, his eyes tracing her every movement. He showed no emotion, no sympathy. Only interest. As if she were an object, something to be evaluated and used. He stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. "You look hungry," he said, his voice smooth, almost gentle. Lily's throat tightened, and she could only nod. The man's lips curved into a faint smile. "I have food, and a place to stay." Lily's eyes widened, hope flickering in her gaze. But the man's smile never reached his eyes. It remained cold, calculating. "There's a condition," he continued. "You work for me. Take care of my son. He's very sick." Lily hesitated. "A job? Shelter?" It sounded like a miracle. But the way he looked at her sent a chill down her spine. She took a shaky breath. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man's smile widened. "Just take care of him. Be there for him, always." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And follow the rules. Every single one." Lily felt a knot form in her stomach, but she pushed her fear aside. She was tired, hungry, and desperate. This was her only chance. "I'll do it," she agreed, her voice trembling. The man's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Good. Then follow me." He led her to the car, opening the door with a flourish. Lily climbed inside, the plush leather seats enveloping her in warmth. She sank into the comfort, her body finally relaxing after days of suffering. The man slid in beside her, closing the door with a click. As the car sped through the city, Lily watched the streets blur by, her heart pounding in her chest. She was leaving her old life behind, venturing into the unknown. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at a mansion hidden behind tall, iron gates. The place was enormous, cold, and unwelcoming. The windows were dark, and the stone walls loomed high, like a fortress keeping the world out. The man stepped out of the car and gestured for her to follow. Lily hesitated, her feet frozen to the ground. Something about the mansion felt wrong, suffocating. But she had nowhere else to go. Summoning her courage, she stepped out and followed him inside. The doors creaked open, revealing a grand hall adorned with chandeliers and marble floors. The air was cold, and the silence was oppressive. The man turned to her, his expression as cold as ever. "My son is upstairs. Remember the rules. And don't try to leave. Ever." Lily swallowed hard, nodding silently. The man's eyes narrowed. "Good. Now go." She climbed the staircase, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls. At the end of the corridor, she found the door slightly ajar. She peeked inside, her breath catching in her throat. A boy lay in the bed, pale and fragile, surrounded by machines and wires. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful, almost angelic. For a moment, Lily's heart softened. This was the child she had to take care of. She stepped inside, her movements slow and cautious. The room was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the machines. She approached the bed, reaching out to touch the boy's hand. His eyes flickered open, and Lily gasped. His gaze was hollow, distant, as if he were trapped in a place she couldn't reach. But then his lips moved, whispering words so faint she barely heard them. "Help me." Before she could respond, a chill ran down her spine. She looked around the room, her eyes falling on a small, blinking light in the corner. A camera. It was watching her, recording her every move. She shuddered, feeling an icy dread crawl over her skin. She wasn't alone in this house. Not for a second. The mansion was vast and eerily quiet. Its grand halls were filled with shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the echo of Lily's footsteps as she navigated the cold marble floors. She felt small and insignificant within its walls, like a lost soul wandering through a labyrinth. The air was heavy, and the windows were covered with thick, velvet curtains that blocked out the sunlight. No warmth. No life. Just darkness. The boy's room was at the end of the long hallway, isolated from the rest of the house. Each step she took toward that door sent chills down her spine. The man's words echoed in her mind. "Follow the rules, and don't try to leave. Ever." Taking a deep breath, she gently pushed the door open. The boy lay motionless in the bed, surrounded by machines that beeped softly. His face was pale, his body fragile, as if a single touch could break him. Lily approached cautiously, her heart aching at the sight of him. His eyes were closed, long lashes resting on his hollow cheeks. He looked so peaceful, yet so lonely. She wondered how long he had been confined to this room, cut off from the world outside. She sat beside the bed, brushing a stray hair from his forehead. His skin was cold, his breathing shallow. Lily's chest tightened. She knew this boy needed more than just medicine. He needed warmth, comfort, and love. Her fingers curled around his tiny hand, and she whispered softly, "It's okay. I'm here now. You're not alone." His eyelids fluttered, and his eyes slowly opened, hazy and unfocused. For a moment, he stared at her, confusion clouding his gaze. Then, his lips moved, his voice weak and trembling. "Who are you?" Lily smiled gently. "My name's Lily. I'm here to take care of you." A flicker of hope danced in his tired eyes, but it quickly faded. "They all leave, they all run away." His words were barely audible, filled with pain and sorrow. Lily's heart sank. What had this child been through? What kind of life was he living in this cold, empty mansion? "I'm not going anywhere," she promised, her voice firm and steady. His eyes widened, a tear slipping down his cheek. "Promise? Promise," she whispered, squeezing his hand gently. From the corner of the room, the camera's red light blinked, recording every word, every tear. The man watched from his study, his face emotionless, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. He leaned back, his eyes narrowing as he replayed the footage. A satisfied smile crept onto his lips. "She's perfect," he murmured, his voice cold and calculating. The camera continued to watch, capturing Lily's every movement, every gesture of kindness. The man's fingers danced over the keyboard, zooming in on her face. He watched her eyes, her expressions, analyzing every detail. "Keep her close, she's exactly what we need." His words hung in the air, heavy and sinister. The computer screen flickered, switching to another camera feed. In the hallway, Lily was carrying a tray of food, humming softly to herself. The man's eyes followed her, his gaze cold and piercing. Every corner of the mansion was under his control, monitored and observed. There was no escape. Not for Lily. Not for his son. Back in the room, Lily helped the boy sit up, propping pillows behind his back. She fed him spoonfuls of warm soup, her voice gentle as she told him stories of the outside world. Of sunshine, laughter, and freedom. Things he had never known. The boy's eyes sparkled with wonder as he listened, a faint smile gracing his lips. He hung on to her every word, desperate for the warmth and love she offered. For the first time, he felt safe. For the first time, he felt alive. Days passed, and the bond between them grew stronger. Lily spent every waking moment by his side, holding his hand, singing lullabies, and reading him stories. The boy began to trust her, to rely on her, to need her. He would wait for her by the window, his face pressed against the cold glass, his eyes searching for her. And every time she walked through that door, his face would light up, his arms reaching out to embrace her. Lily's heart softened with every smile, every laugh he shared. She no longer felt alone. She no longer felt afraid. This boy had given her a purpose, a reason to stay. But she never noticed the camera's unblinking eye, watching them both. Recording their every word, every emotion. Feeding it all to the man who sat in his dark study, his face illuminated by the glow of the screen. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the desk, his eyes fixed on Lily's face. "She's perfect," he whispered again, his voice echoing through the empty room. He leaned forward, his gaze cold and calculating. "This will work, this time, it will work." Lily had no idea she was being watched. She had no idea she was part of his plan. She only knew that she had found someone who needed her, someone who loved her. And for the first time, she felt like she belonged. But the shadows in the mansion were growing darker. The silence was becoming heavier. And the man's intentions were far from pure. Lily was trapped in his web, caught in his game. And the camera would reveal everything. Lily's days were filled with routines, but the nights were haunted by whispers. She would hear them echoing through the mansion's cold hallways. Soft murmurs, distant but clear, drifting through the darkness like ghostly sighs. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, a trick of the mind in this enormous, lifeless house. But the whispers grew louder, more distinct, filled with words she couldn't quite understand. It was as if the walls were alive, hiding secrets they were desperate to share. The boy sensed it too. His eyes would dart to the corners of the room, his body tensing as if expecting someone to appear. "Do you hear them?" he asked one night, his voice trembling. Lily's heart skipped a beat, but she forced a smile. "It's just the wind," she whispered, trying to reassure him. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. The mansion was hiding something. Something dark. Something sinister. Her curiosity grew stronger, fueled by the whispers and the shadows that seemed to follow her. She started to notice the cameras, small and discreet, tucked away in the corners. They watched her constantly, their red lights blinking in the darkness. A cold chill ran down her spine every time she felt their gaze. She tried to ignore them, to pretend they didn't exist. But the feeling of being watched never went away. Not even for a second. One night, as the mansion lay shrouded in silence, Lily decided to explore. She tiptoed through the hallways, her heart pounding, the floorboards creaking under her weight. The whispers seemed to guide her, leading her down a narrow staircase to the basement. The door was heavy, its metal handle cold against her skin. She hesitated, fear clawing at her chest. But the whispers urged her on, their voices growing more insistent. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open. The air was thick, musty, and cold. The basement was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of flickering lights. Rows of monitors lined the walls, each screen displaying a different part of the mansion. Lily's blood ran cold as she realized what she was looking at. Every room. Every hallway. Even the boys' room. They were all under surveillance. Her heart raced as her eyes darted from screen to screen. The cameras were everywhere, capturing every movement, every breath. She saw herself, standing in the hallway, eyes wide with horror. The red light blinked, the camera focusing on her face. She stumbled back, her body trembling. Who would do this? Why was every corner of the house being watched? Then she saw him. On one of the screens, the man sat in his study, his back turned to the camera. He was watching the monitors, his eyes glued to the screens. His fingers tapped rhythmically on his desk, a sinister smile playing on his lips. Lily's heart sank. He was watching her. He was watching everything. Her stomach twisted with fear and disgust. Why? Why was he doing this? The answer came in the form of a whisper. So faint, so fragile, it almost went unheard. "Help me." Lily's eyes snapped to the screen showing the boy's room. He was awake, his eyes wide and filled with terror. He was looking directly at the camera, his lips moving silently. Her heart shattered. He knew. He knew he was being watched. He knew he was trapped. And Lily realized in that moment that she was trapped too. A prisoner in this house of shadows and lies. She ran back to his room, her feet flying over the cold floors. The door burst open, and she rushed to his side, her arms wrapping around him. "It's okay. I'm here. I won't leave you." The boy clung to her, his tiny body shaking with sobs. "They never stay. They always leave." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I won't leave," she promised, her voice breaking. "I'll protect you. No matter what." But even as she spoke the words, she felt the camera's gaze on her back. Cold. Unforgiving. The red light blinked, recording her every word, every tear. She knew he was watching. She knew he was listening. And she knew he wouldn't let her leave. The next morning, the man appeared in the room, his face emotionless, his eyes piercing. He stood by the door, his presence cold and suffocating. "How is he?" he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Lily swallowed the lump in her throat, forcing herself to look at him. "He's getting better. He's smiling again." The man's lips curled into a faint smile. "Good. You're doing well." His eyes flicked to the camera in the corner, and Lily's blood ran cold. "You're following the rules, so far." She felt her heart race, her body stiffening under his gaze. The man stepped closer, his face mere inches from hers. "Remember, you're never alone. I see everything." His voice was low, menacing, sending shivers down her spine. He turned to leave, his footsteps echoing through the hallway. Lily's body trembled, fear paralyzing her. He knew. He knew she had discovered his secret. And he was warning her. She collapsed onto the floor, her hands covering her mouth to stifle her sobs. She was trapped. Nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide. The camera watched her silently, the red light blinking in the darkness. It recorded her fear, her despair. It captured her helplessness. The mansion's shadows grew longer, the whispers growing louder. The truth was unraveling, piece by piece. But the worst was yet to come. Lily was part of his game. And he was not done with her yet. Lily's heart raced as she stood frozen outside the man's study. The door was slightly ajar, and she could hear his voice, low and menacing, speaking to someone on the phone. "She's perfect, exactly what we needed. Innocent. Pure-hearted." His words sent a chill down her spine. He was talking about her. She pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath, ears straining to hear every word. "The curse will be lifted soon. My son will be saved, and she will be the price." Lily's blood ran cold. A curse? A price? Her body trembled as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The cameras. The surveillance. The whispers in the mansion. It was all connected. She felt sick, her stomach twisting with fear and betrayal. The man never wanted her to care for his son. He wanted her to be a sacrifice. A cold laugh echoed from the study. She suspects nothing. She actually cares for him. It makes her soul even purer. The ritual will be complete soon. Lily clamped a hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Her love and kindness were being used against her. Her compassion was sealing her fate. She turned to run, but her foot hit the edge of a vase, sending it crashing to the floor. The man's voice went silent. The door flew open, and his cold eyes locked onto her. His face was a mask of calm, but his eyes were blazing with fury. "You shouldn't have heard that," he whispered, his voice deadly. Lily's body moved on instinct, her legs propelling her down the hallway. She ran blindly, her heart pounding, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could hear his footsteps behind her, steady and unhurried. He wasn't in a hurry. He knew she had nowhere to go. Lily burst into the boy's room, slamming the door behind her. He was sitting by the window, his face pale and lifeless. "Lily," he whispered, confusion and fear in his eyes. She ran to him, wrapping her arms around his fragile body. "We have to go," she choked out, her voice trembling. The boy shook his head, his eyes hollow. "We can't. He'll never let us leave." Tears fell from her eyes as she looked at him, realizing the depth of his despair. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice cracking. His gaze dropped to the floor. "Forever. I was born with this curse. He's tried before, to save me. But they all failed. They all died." Lily's heart shattered. That's why he was so lonely. Why he was so scared. He was cursed, and his father was willing to do anything to break it. Even if it meant sacrificing innocent lives. The door creaked open, and the man stepped inside, his face calm, his eyes cold. "There's nowhere to run, Lily. You were chosen for this." Lily backed away, her arms tightening around the boy. "I trusted you. I trusted you," she screamed, her voice raw with pain and anger. The man's expression didn't change. "I did what I had to do. My son's life is more important than yours. You're nothing but a means to an end." His words were like daggers, slicing through her heart. She had given him her loyalty, her trust, and he had betrayed her in the cruelest way. He moved toward them, his presence suffocating, his eyes fixed on her. Lily's body shook with fear, but she stood her ground, shielding the boy with her own body. "You can't have him. I won't let you do this." The man's lips curled into a cruel smile. "You don't have a choice." He raised his hand, and shadows danced around him, swirling and twisting in the air. The temperature dropped, and the room was filled with a dark, menacing energy. The curse. It was alive, feeding on despair, growing stronger. It reached for Lily, its icy tendrils wrapping around her, pulling her toward him. She screamed as pain shot through her body, cold and relentless. The boy's voice cut through the darkness. "No! Don't hurt her! Please!" His small hands clung to her, his face twisted in fear and sorrow. "Don't leave me, Lily. Don't leave me." Her heart broke at his words, at the desperation in his voice. She wouldn't leave him. She couldn't. Even if it meant her own death. With every ounce of strength she had left, she wrapped her arms around him, shielding him from the darkness. "I promised you," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I promised I wouldn't leave." The shadows tightened, suffocating her, draining her life away. She felt herself slipping, her vision fading. But she held on to him, refusing to let go. The boy sobbed, his tiny body trembling in her embrace. "I don't want you to die. I don't want anyone to die." His tears sparkled like diamonds, pure and innocent, falling onto Lily's face. The shadows recoiled, hissing in agony. The boy's purity, his love, it was destroying the curse. The man's eyes widened in horror. "No! Stop!" he screamed, reaching for his son. But it was too late. The curse shattered, the darkness dissolving into light. The man was thrown back, his body crashing into the wall. His face contorted with pain as the curse turned on him, feeding on his hatred and greed. He screamed as the shadows consumed him, his body withering, his soul vanishing. The mansion shook, the walls cracking, the whispers growing louder. Then, silence. Lily opened her eyes, her body weak, her vision blurred. The boy lay in her arms, his face peaceful, his body warm. The curse was gone. He was free. But his father was gone too. The man who had sacrificed everything and lost everything. Lily held the boy close, tears streaming down her face. She had saved him. But she had lost herself. The camera's red light blinked one last time before fading to black. The mansion was empty, silent, a tomb for the man's ambition and greed. Lily and the boy walked out into the light, leaving the shadows behind. The curse was broken. But the scars would remain forever. Sometimes, those who seek to control fate are the ones who fall victim to it. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the empty mansion. Its walls stood silent, hollow, like the shell of a once powerful beast now defeated. The shadows that once haunted its halls were gone, dissolved into light. Lily stood by the iron gates, her eyes fixed on the towering structure. The boy clung to her hand, his tiny fingers wrapped around hers, his face calm and peaceful. For the first time, he looked free. No wires. No machines. Just a child, breathing on his own, smiling at the world. She knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his face. His eyes sparkled with life, warmth radiating from his rosy cheeks. He was no longer the fragile, cursed boy trapped in a room of shadows. He was reborn. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice trembling with emotion. The boy nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude and love. "Thank you, Lily, for saving me." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she pulled him into a tight embrace. "You saved me too," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You showed me how to love, how to care, how to be brave." They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, under the golden light of the setting sun. The curse was broken. The nightmare was over. But Lily knew she couldn't stay. This place held too many memories, too much pain. She had to leave. She gently pulled away, her heart aching as she looked into his innocent eyes. "I have to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The boy's smile faded, his eyes widening in fear. "No, please don't leave me. I don't want to be alone." Lily's heart shattered, but she forced herself to be strong. "You're not alone," she assured him, her hands cupping his face. "You're free now. You can live, be happy, find your own path." The boy's lips quivered, tears brimming in his eyes. "But who will take care of me?" Lily choked back a sob, her fingers trembling as she wiped away his tears. "You're stronger than you think. You're brave and kind, and you'll never be alone." She kissed his forehead, her lips lingering as she memorized his warmth. "Goodbye, my angel." She turned and walked away, her feet heavy, her heart breaking with every step. The boy watched her go, his tiny hands reaching out, his face stained with tears. But he didn't run after her. He stood there, watching her disappear into the horizon, holding on to her love, her courage, her memory. The mansion loomed behind him, its windows reflecting the golden light. It was no longer a prison. It was just a house. An empty shell. A monument to his father's greed and ambition. The curse had been broken. But the man had lost everything. His power. His wealth. His life. Consumed by his own darkness. The boy turned away, his shoulders straight, his head held high. He was no longer afraid. He was free. Lily's figure faded into the distance, swallowed by the setting sun. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Her heart couldn't bear the pain. She had saved him. But she had lost a part of herself. She walked on, alone, her tears falling like raindrops, her soul aching with loss and love. But she knew she had done the right thing. She had kept her promise. She had broken the curse. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying her name, her story, her sacrifice. She was gone, but she would never be forgotten. Sometimes, those who have nothing to give, end up giving everything. The mansion stood silent, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. Its shadows were gone. Its curse was broken. But its story would live on. If this story moved you, please like and share it with those you love. Subscribe to our channel for more unexpected and powerful stories. And remember, sometimes the greatest sacrifices come from the most unlikely hearts. Thank you for watching.